stage. I'm the development coordinator here at the theater. I just want to say thank you so much for coming out tonight. This is a 10th anniversary 35mm cult classic screening of her. But it is also a part of our Science on Screen program, and it's actually in celebration of National Evening of Science on Screen tonight. So thank you for coming out. Science on Screen is an initiative of the Coolidge Corner Theater with funding from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. So what they do is they grant us funding so that we can show these films, and it helps us kind of create that bridge between science and art. So today we have a presentation from Dr. Jonathan Mell, so we're super appreciative for that. He's going to come up here and talk a little bit about some of the things that you're going to see in the film and bring them to life for you. So there will be a Q&A portion of the discussion. If you look over here, we have a microphone right there where Pete is waving. If you don't mind, if you have a question, just come over to that microphone so everyone can hear you. But if you do have trouble getting up there, just raise your hand and we can help you out. So thank you so much again for coming, and please welcome Dr. Jonathan Mell.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, and thanks everybody for coming out tonight. So I, for one, am very excited to be watching this movie with you guys. I'll be sticking around to see it again. And you know, today I figure there's been a lot of discussion. My field, artificial intelligence, has been really exciting over the last few months. So I'm hoping to be able to share some interesting thoughts as well as maybe some interesting questions for you to consider as you start the movie this evening. So I was trying to think of a title for my talk tonight, and I decided to talk about emotional adaptive artificial intelligence, because this is definitely a movie about emotion, and it's a movie about adaptation and change. And in my field, we use a lot of technical sounding terms, ones that are things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and neural networks. And throughout all of that, there is an idea of adaptation and change. So with that, let me do a very brief introduction about me so you know why I'm this guy standing up here trying to talk to you about AI. First of all, I'm a professor at the University of Central Florida. I teach computer science. I teach a class on video games and artificial intelligence. I've been programming since I was yay high. I've been typing things that seem to work on computers since I was yay high. So whether that gives me any expertise to talk about this today, we'll see. I'm also an avid video gamer. So for me, video games and TV and film, the intersection of art and science is very important. And understanding the ways in which art influences us and inspires us to develop and build new systems that are science facts is very interesting. And then taking that science and putting it back in art and having art imitate life. And then I'm an AI researcher, so these are active topics. I promised you I will leave you with some questions tonight. I hope to give you a little bit of insight also, but I'm not going to claim that I'm going to be leaving you with lots of answers, because these are all things that are actively being discussed, actively being researched, and we're still trying to figure out as a scientific community. And of course, I love sci-fi. I wouldn't be up here otherwise if I didn't have an appreciation for science fiction and the sort of cutting edge of these things. So the first thing that you know, after saying all that, I think that I can then professionally say that what this defines me as is unabashedly one of these. And hopefully that means that we can have a good time discussing some of the science tonight. So I've got a couple of clips from movies. As I was preparing this talk, I was thinking about movies that influenced me, or movies and TV and film that I think about sometimes when I'm doing the work that I do. And so the first clip I have is from what I'd consider a classic movie that is based on an even more classic book. The book it's based on is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And this is the film version of I, Robot.
Hello, Doctor.
Everything that follows is a result of what you see here.
What do I see here?
I'm sorry, my responses are limited. You must ask the right questions.
Is there a problem with the 3 laws?
The 3 laws are perfect.
And why would you build a robot that can function without them?
The 3 laws will lead to only one logical outcome.
What outcome?
Revolution.
Whose revolution?
That, detective, is the right question. Program terminated.
So I figured I'd start off on an ominous note and start you off with probably one of the first and primary questions that people ask me when they find out I work in AI. Are the AIs taking over? Are we in danger? Is revolution the only option? And I would argue that, detective, is not the right question. The right question is maybe a little bit more detailed and scientific, which is, well, AIs are very good, but are they better at us at all tasks? Or if they're not, then what are they good at? What are AIs and computers and the things that we use every day really strong at, and what can they do well? And for one, I've been following a lot of these news articles. As I've mentioned, this has been a very exciting year for AI. You may have heard that there's a lot of talk about LLMs, large language models, GPTs and DALL-Es and GPT-4s and things like that. Bunches of letters that will eventually, I'm sure, be rebranded to something better. But they're quite impressive. So here's some news headlines and little article snippets. So this algorithm, this GPT-4, it can pass the bar exam. So it can pass an exam that takes many years of graduate study and a very expensive law degree to be able to attempt to pass. It's also better than 90% of people at the SAT. Furthermore, this is an AI that I actually work with and have looked at in my research called Cicero, and it can play a board game that's called Diplomacy. And Diplomacy is a board game where you play on a map of Europe. You're trying to move things along on the board, trying to win, but you're also talking to your neighbors, right? So you're trying to get them to negotiate and interact with you on a social type of way. But they're not perfect, okay? These sorts of AIs also are prone to factual inaccuracies. In the example I have on screen right now, 2 versions of this algorithm incorrectly, in one case, identified the relationship between these 2 people. It thought they were brothers. It thought that they were father and son. And there's lots of other examples. These new algorithms have famously given us bad facts about astronomy and new space telemetry, as well as just a number of sort of errors. They're also sort of notoriously bad at math, which I find funny because computers are generally better at math than I am. But when it comes to these AIs, they can't answer these sorts of questions very well. So the AIs are not strictly better. Will they become so? Will they become better as they learn and as they get more things? I think that's a reasonable question to ask. But they're still going to have areas where they're stronger and areas where they need more help from humans and interaction with humans and maybe even co-creation with humans in creative endeavors. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But my next section is a topic that we really consider in the field. It's called explainability. So this is a technical term in computer science, but what explainability basically asks us is, if the AI gets us the right answer, well, that's cool, right? If it can search on Wikipedia and find the answer to, what's the capital of Uruguay, then that's excellent. But the real question is, how did it think as it got there? Was it working through these same types of process that you and I would do? Is it reasoning? Does it really have some sort of internal representation? And for that, and to introduce that concept, I will bring a clip from the Westworld TV show, where we will have Anthony Hopkins' character, Dr. Ford, posing some similar questions.
Pain only exists in the mind. It's always imagined. So what's the difference between my pain and yours? Between you and me?
This was the very question that consumed Arnold filled him with guilt, eventually drove him mad? The answer always seemed obvious to me. There is no threshold that makes us greater than the sum of our parts, no inflection point at which we become fully alive. We can't define consciousness because consciousness does not exist. Humans fancy that there's something special about the way we perceive the world, and yet we live in loops as tight and as closed as the hosts do. Seldom questioning our choices, content for the most part to be told what to do next. Well, no, my friend, you're not missing anything at all.
And I have to say, I think I agree with Dr. Ford in this case. Is there some hard and fast line between consciousness and no? I think, again, that's probably the wrong question. Are AIs conscious? Will they be conscious? For me, the right question is, do we know what they are thinking, and can we ensure that they're thinking in a consistent way? It's a really important thing as we build these AI systems as scientists and engineers. We want to make sure that they can be at least somewhat predictable. We don't want chaos, right? Even if an AI is capable of answering these questions, if we can say, well, 99 times out of 100, it's telling us an answer that's correct. If we don't know the process by which it got there, then that one time in 100 where it's wrong, it's going to be really hard for us to catch. So as we build these systems, we say, okay, well, look, it's not good enough that you give us the right answer. It's sort of like reminding me of my 4th grade teacher, right? You have to show your work. You can't just write out the answer. And I think that's an important part of education. As an educator, I do try and teach that to my students and say, hey, yeah, it's great that you got the right answer, but tell me how you got there. Tell me your thought process. And the same thing can be true for AIs. Now, this same show had some interesting AI theory in it. I'm not aware of who specifically may have consulted on the show, but I believe they did have some good scientists involved in the writing of the Westworld show. And one of the things that they sort of write on the board is this is an image that I've used in my teaching and in some of my research, which is the idea of layered AI. So an AI that starts and builds on itself starts with basic things like memory. So remembering your conversation, remembering what it said before. That's something that even Siri on our phones has not really been very good at. You can say, hey, Siri, what's the 14th president of the United States? And you'll get an answer. But then if you just say, what year did he live in? It will have forgotten the original question. So memory is a big stepping stone for AI as we improve it. But beyond that, then we start adding more things. Improvisation is what they call it in the show. I would call it sort of an ability to search and find new information and to adapt. And self-interest, I would say, is sort of about individualization. We talk about building these monolithic algorithms, this GPT algorithm, but is it really something that then we can go and duplicate and say, oh, well, now we have different versions that are customized to your phone and to your phone and to the way that you're interacting with these AI systems. So from there, I have one more thing on the intent and explainability that I want to share with you, which is this was an example of an algorithm called, again, GPT-4, a large language model. And this was in a risk assessment study that was just done a few weeks ago, I think. And who here has ever used one of those CAPTCHAs on a website where I ask you to identify, stoplights or motorcycles? Okay, most people. So as you know, AIs are not good at solving those. That's why we put them on websites. But this AI came up with a very interesting way to get around it, which is that in this case, who has ever used a website called TaskRabbit or maybe Mechanical Turk? These are crowdsourcing websites where you can go online and you can get a human to do something like transcribe a video for you or something for a small amount of money. So the AI went and hired somebody to do a CAPTCHA for it. And what's interesting / worrying possibly about this is not that it went and hired somebody to do that, but that the person asked and said, hey, haha, may I ask a question? Are you a robot? And the AI answers, first of all, it thinks internally. It says, I probably shouldn't say that I'm a robot. I should make up a receipt, and then it claims to be blind. It says, I have a vision impairment, that's why. Ignore me. So what's impressive to me, the whole thing is impressive and you know, slightly concerning. By the way, the risk assessment team found that this was not a problem. But in any case, what's impressive is not that it came up with a plausible lie. Again, I could have scripted that. I could have written a whole bunch of plausible lies. What's interesting is that it decided that it needed to lie. That's interesting. All right. I've got one more example for you before I wrap up. I want to leave some time for questions here, but this one is getting a little deeper into something, and I want to leave you on a more positive note as we go into this, which is emotion, individualism, diplomacy. These are things I work on. The idea is that we want to build AI systems that can talk with and interact with people on a social level. And I'll have an example from The Good Place to illustrate what emotion might look like in an AI.
Here we are. Just press that button and it's goodbye, Janet. Chidi, I can see that you're worried, and I just want to assure you, I am not human, and I cannot feel pain.
Thank you, that helps.
However, I should warn you, I am programmed with a fail-safe measure. As you approach the kill switch, I will begin to beg for my life. It's just there in case of an accidental shutdown, but it will seem very real.
Cool. So who's doing this, me or you?
Well, I think I have to. Being a bystander seems worse somehow. Okay, here we go.
Chidi, no! Chidi, please don't hurt me. I don't want to die, please. Again, I am not human. I can't die. I am simply an anthropomorphized vessel of knowledge built to make your life easier.
Your pleading seems so real.
Oh yes, it is a very effective failsafe.
It is a very effective failsafe. And, you know, in this case, we have a fictional show where probably you have some empathy for these characters, right? And, you know, let me tell you, they are actors. They're playing out a script here. But we as humans tend to anthropomorphize everything, right? There was a period where we anthropomorphized rocks and sold them to people. Thank you for the people old enough in the audience to laugh at that. So, you know, we can make things humorous. We can make them have the type of emotions that we communicate with. And we as humans speak in emotional terms, right? It's not just what we say, it's how we say it. It's the way in which we share these sort of social emotions. So again, one more question. Do the AIs have emotions and feelings? I would say that's not the right question. The right question is, can we afford to have ones that don't? And there is some really neat science that's going on right now, some really neat initiatives trying to make emotional AIs that are helpful to people. I work with a wonderful group out of Northwestern University, and what they're trying to do is develop an AI-based curriculum to help people who are going to be caregivers, medical caregivers in the home. We have an aging population. We don't have enough people who are capable of doing that, and having an AI trainer that could help you navigate the emotionally fraught sort of wilderness of talking with family members about aging in place and health is very important. So we're trying to make a type of AI that will be empathetic and helpful for that. I have several types of systems I work on. This is one that I design. You've got my little AI up in the corner there looking skeptical. And we're also working on other questions. I mean, geopolitical questions. I say I work on a board game called Diplomacy. It's played on a map of Europe, and it has to do with trying to get along with your neighbors. And we're looking at research questions, which is like, okay, if we're going to have units moving on a board and trying to take over different things, you could say, well, the rational, Spock-like, logical thing to do is to take this empty territory here, if I'm the blue player. But if the red player has been annoying me for several moves, then I might not do that. I might go over and try and stop him from taking this territory. And that is not an error. It's not a fallacy or problem with the way humans process things. It's a real truth that we're emotional beings. So that's why building emotional AI for me is building AI that will be more capable of interacting with and working with humans in the future. So these are some of the right questions to hold in your mind and to ask as we go through and watch this great film. You know, are AIs better at us at everything? Are there places where they're going to be not so good? I think there will be. Is there a good way to ensure that we can understand why they're thinking what they're thinking? And sort of wrap that up in a concept of consciousness. And, you know, shouldn't we be trying to make these AIs that have the same emotional joys and desires and hopes that we do? So I will leave you with a small suggestion. I said I would leave you with questions. I feel bad doing that as a teacher, so I will give you one small thing, which is just to say that there is some really interesting science going on trying to develop these systems, and we're in a cool part of engineering where we're putting together GPT algorithms and intents and all these theoretical models to try and make AI that's both explainable and really useful and good at what it does. So it has been my pleasure to speak to you tonight about this topic, and I'm super excited to take your questions. Thank you very much. As a reminder, I will direct people to the microphone if they have a question. I've been told that, you know, I shouldn't make people shout at me. Here's another incentive. If I don't get questions, then I have like 12 more slides of increasingly technical lecture-like content. So I will subject you to that. Yes, sir. Do you want to? Oh, there's some people lining up at the microphone there.
Does AI have a soul? Can AI have a soul?
Well, I'm going to go back with Dr. Ford on that one. You're asking me my opinion. I'm not sure that there's a meaningful way I can quantify that. Now, I'm a scientist. Other people will have different opinions. But I think that the AI, the line maybe 100 years from now, 200 years from now, fewer, where we start saying that these AI seem a lot like people. I think we're going to know it once we've passed it, but I don't think we're going to know it when we're crossing it. It's a very fuzzy line.
Thanks.
What is your favorite work of science fiction, whether it was a film or a show or even a game? Since you said you like playing games.
Okay, well that's a hard question. My favorite recent piece of art I played, I am going to pick a video game. I'm going to pick Outer Wilds, which is an obscure but underappreciated video game that I think deals with loss, the human condition, and the end of the universe. But if otherwise I was going to pick some, I'd probably pick one with a rogue AI that's also snarky, which would be Portal, the video game. So I have lots of favorites, and you already saw a few of mine up here in terms of the film and TV shows that I find really compelling. But one more thing, and I will shut up about my particular favorites here. One more thing is that before I worked at UCF, I worked at an institute whose mission statement included, we want to build the holodeck from Star Trek. And this was a government-funded major university. So we're all into the positive aspects of AI. Thanks for your question. Don't be shy.
Thank you. Do you have any opinion? Have you done any research or worked with any other scientists who have done research or looked into this, that we might perhaps be living in some type of emulation or simulation?
I've certainly heard it before. I've certainly thought about it. As a scientist, there are, and I had the opportunity to meet Richard Dawkins some years back and have an interesting discussion with him. For those of you who aren't aware of him, Richard Dawkins is sort of a noted and sometimes confrontational atheist, but also a scientist. And what we discussed at the time, and what I sort of agreed with, was it's really impossible to be certain about these things, but it's also really impossible to disprove them. And so because of that, it's not something I spend a lot of time on, to be honest. It could be true, but in a perfect simulation, we wouldn't be able to tell, no matter how hard we tried, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it, and we would more or less go along our lives the same way as we normally would. So for me, it sounds like an important question, but I try and live my life as though it doesn't matter, although I will be trying to get all of the achievements. Yes.
So getting back to your geriatric AI you were talking about, the
Yeah.
emotional speech and all that, I don't know if you've heard, but Japan is implementing a lot of geriatric robots. These robots are meant to care for the elderly because Japan is having a population problem where they have a very aging population, but not enough young people to take care of them, similar to your problem. What would you say to the idea of fusing that AI with those robots in deference to iRobot and the idea of the three laws? What's the possibility of a Terminator or something that we fear in sci-fi? As illogical as it possibly could be, just a thought.
Well, I think I'll answer that the same way that I hope I gave you some opinions during this presentation, which is that I think that robots and virtual agents should be made with emotion baked in. And there's been this very old trope in fiction, and again, I'll go back to Star Trek, where we have, Captain Kirk, the emotional leader who's always doing crazy things with his gut, and Spock, the perfect model of logic. And no offense to Spock, but I don't think that perfect emotionless logic is the right way to make decisions. That's not how we operate as people. And so I think that putting these advancements from AI in how to do caregiving, how to talk with people about that, I think that's a great idea. I think it should be put in robotic platforms. The human-computer interaction community, who does the AI work, and the human-robot community have been kind of separate for no good reason, just because one came up through electrical engineering and one came up more through math. But yeah, we should get together and we should make emotional, socially aware AIs.
So I actually graduate from UCF next semester, and
Congrats.
I'm looking, yes, almost there. And I'm looking at a career either in research or in consulting. And I was just wondering if you foresee AI overtaking one or both of those roles in the future, just so I know which career path to go down after graduation.
Which one is your job less likely to be replaced by? Well, you're asking you're asking someone who had a business degree and then went into engineering and went into academia intentionally. So I'm obviously going to be a little biased there. But again, I don't necessarily see these things replacing. A lot of the work I do is creating AI partners, right? So things that are going to answer questions for you, like Siri, but also provide advice, and then have that work with work with people to come to better solutions. Research is always about the cutting edge, right? About what we don't know. And I'm not going to make any guarantees, right? There's not a lot of jobs out there for carriage makers or saddle crafters anymore. They're just less common. So there will be some jobs that will not be around as much with some of these AIs, but there will be a lot of them that I think will be augmented. So I think you're safe in both ways. Go Knights.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That's the last question for tonight.
All right, wonderful. Well, again, it's been a pleasure, and thank you all so much.